They were once everywhere, on television screens, in music performances, and in the memories of millions of viewers who grew up watching them. But today, a strange question surrounds their name. Where did they go, and what really happened after fame faded? At one point, there were familiar faces in the entertainment world, but now, they exist mostly in old clips, forgotten reruns, and the curiosity of people searching for answers. This is a story of the Hager twins, and it is not just about fame. It is about time, change, and the silent way life moves forward when the spotlight turns away. To understand their story, you have to go back to a time when entertainment was very different from what it is today. There were no social media platforms, no instant viral fame, and no overnight internet celebrities. Success in those days came slowly, through live performances, television appearances, and years of effort. For two brothers growing up in that world, the dream of entertainment was not something that happened quickly. It was something built step by step, moment by moment, through persistence and passion. They were not born into fame. Like many performers of their era, they had to earn attention in a world where only the most unique voices stood out. Early in their journey, they faced the same challenges that every aspiring entertainer faces: uncertainty, rejection, and long period of struggle where recognition felt distant. But what made their story different was their connection as twins and their ability to bring something natural and entertaining to every stage they stepped onto. There was a chemistry between them that audiences could feel without needing explanation. That as time passed, small opportunities slowly turned into bigger ones. Local performances led to wider recognition. Television appearances began to open doors that were previously closed. In an industry where competition was intense and attention was hard to earn, they managed to carve out a space for themselves. It was not instant success. It was gradual growth, built on consistency and presence. And when they finally started gaining attention, it felt like everything was moving in the right direction. There was a point in their journey where everything seemed to align. Audiences responded positively. Their performances were noticed. Their presence in entertainment became more consistent. In the world of television and live shows, they became recognizable figures, and for a while, it seemed like their rise would continue without interruption. This was a stage where many entertainers feel like they have finally reached stability, where the hard work of the past begins to show visible results. But fame is never a straight road. It rises, it peaks, and then slowly, almost quietly, it begins to shift. The entertainment world does not stay still. New faces appear. New styles emerge. Audiences change their attention without even realizing it. What once felt fresh and exciting eventually becomes part of the past. And for many performers, this transition does not happen dramatically. It happens slowly, almost invisibly. Over time, their appearances became less frequent. The spotlight that once followed them so closely began to move in different directions. It was not a sudden disappearance, but rather a gradual fading. Fans who were used to seeing them on screens began to notice longer gaps between appearances. Questions started to form naturally. Where were they? Why were they not as visible as before? What changed? This is where the nature of entertainment becomes most clear. Fame is not just about talent. It is also about timing, trends, and the constant evolution of audience interest. Even the most recognizable names can slowly step away from public attention without any single defining moment. It is not always a fall. Sometimes, it is simply a shift in life, priorities, and opportunity that in many cases, entertainers reach a point where life outside the spotlight becomes more important than life inside it. The constant attention, the demands of performance, and the pressure of public presence can naturally lead people toward quieter paths. And while the audience often sees disappearance, the reality is usually a transition into a different chapter of life. For the Hager twins, this transition became part of their natural journey. As years moved forward, their presence in mainstream entertainment reduced, and they gradually step away from the environment that once defined their careers. But stepping away from the spotlight does not erase what came before. It simply changes how that story continues. Even after they became less visible, their earlier work continued to exist. Old recordings, television moments, and memories preserve their presence in entertainment history. And for those who remembered them, their identity never truly disappeared. It shifted from active fame to remembered legacy. This is something that happens often in entertainment, where time transformed public figures into historical names. As the entertainment industry continued to evolve, everything around it changed rapidly. The rise of digital media, online platforms, and global content distribution reshaped how fame works. In today's world, visibility can be constant, immediate, and global. But in earlier eras, fame had a different rhythm. It required sustained television presence, live appearances, and long-term exposure. When that system changed, many performers from earlier generations naturally became less visible in the new landscape. This shift does not mean their contributions lost value. In fact, it often does the opposite. It turns their work into something nostalgic, something people return to when they want to reconnect with a different time in entertainment history. And that is exactly why names like this still appear in searches, discussions, and then and now stories today. There is something powerful about comparing the past with the present. It reminds people of how much time has passed, how much the world has changed, and how even familiar faces evolve over decades. When people revisit old images or videos, the contrast between then and now often creates an emotional reaction, not because something is wrong, but because time has done what it always does. It moves forward. The story of that journey is not only about fame, but also about the human experience behind it. Every entertainer has a life beyond the screen, a life that continues long after public attention fades. And in many cases, that life becomes more private, more personal, and more focused on things outside the entertainment world. What remains important is not just where they are now, but what they represented during their active years. They were part of a generation of performers who shaped the entertainment landscape of their time. Their presence added to the variety, energy, and character of television and music entertainment in that era. And even if their names are not constantly in modern headlines, their contribution still exists in the history of that industry. As time continues, stories like this become more meaningful. They are not just about individuals, but about how fame itself works. It rises, it shines, and eventually it becomes part of memory. And memory is powerful because it keeps stories alive long after the moment has passed. When you look at their journey from beginning to end, it becomes clear that this is not a story of disappearance, but a story of transition, from ambition to recognition, from visibility to quiet life, from active performance to lasting memory. Every stage is part of a complete journey, and each phase carries its own meaning. And perhaps that is the most important lesson hidden inside their story. Fame is temporary, but impact is permanent. Time changes everything, but it does not erase what once mattered to people. The faces may fade from screens, but the memories remain in the minds of those who once watched, listened, and enjoyed their presence to eye in the end. The story of the Hager twins is not just about where they are now. It is about what they once were, what they represented, and how time transforms every public journey into something quieter, but still meaningful. Because even when the spotlight moves away, the story never truly ends. It simply continues in a different form, carried forward by memory, history, and the people who still choose to remember. Even today, when people rediscover their old performances, it creates a strange feeling. It is not just nostalgia, but a reminder of how fast time moves. What once felt current and alive now feels like a memory preserved in history. That is a quiet power of entertainment. It captures moments, but it cannot stop time. And this is why stories like this continue to attract attention. Because every generation eventually looks back and asks the same question: where did they go? And what happened after fame ended? It is a natural curiosity that connects the present with the past. For the Hager twins, their journey now exists in that space between memory and history. They are no longer active figures in the entertainment world, but their presence still exists through what they once created. And for many fans, that is enough to keep their legacy alive. There is something deeply human about this pattern. Every person who reaches a level of recognition eventually faces the same shift. The spotlight does not stay in one place forever. It moves, it changes direction, and it creates space for new stories to begin. But in doing so, it also preserves the old ones in a different way. Because even when careers slow down and public attention fades, the impact does not disappear completely. It stays in conversations, in memories, and in the emotional connection people formed during those years. And that is something no change in time can fully erase. When we step back and look at their entire journey, it becomes more than just a timeline of events. It becomes a reflection of how unpredictable life in entertainment really is. One moment, everything is active, visible, and full of energy. And the next, it becomes quiet, remembered only by those who were there to witness it. But quiet does not mean forgotten. It simply means the story has moved into a different phase, and maybe that is a final truth behind their journey. Not every story ends with closure or headlines. Some stories continue softly, carried forward by memory instead of media. So when people ask today where they are now, the answer is not just about location or activity. The answer is that their story already exists in full. It has already been lived, shared, and remembered. What remains now is reflection, and that reflection is what keeps their name alive. Because in the end, every entertainer leaves behind something more important than fame itself. They leave behind a moment in time that people still remember, even years later, and that is how their story continues, even when the spotlight does not. And when you think about it deeply, this is not just their story alone. It is a story shared by many performers across different eras of entertainment. People who once stood in the spotlight, who once heard applause every night, and who once felt the energy of live audiences, eventually reach a point where everything slows down. Not because they were forgotten instantly, but because time naturally shifts attention elsewhere. In the case of the Hager twins, their journey reflects that quiet transition from visibility to memory. It is not marked by one dramatic ending, but by many small changes over time. Fewer appearances, fewer public moments, and eventually a life that continues away from cameras. But what remains interesting is how their name still comes back into conversation today. Even after years, people still search, still wonder, still ask the same question. That curiosity itself proves something important, that their presence left an impression strong enough to survive time. Because in entertainment, true impact is not always measured by how long someone stays in the spotlight. It is measured by how deeply they were felt while they were there. And as years pass, those moments become part of a larger history. A history made up of countless performers, countless stories, and countless memories that shaped the entertainment world into what it is today. There's also something emotional about revisiting these journeys. It reminds us that nothing stays frozen in time. The faces we once saw regularly eventually become images from the past. The voices we once heard often turn into recordings, and the moments we once experienced become memories we carry forward. Yet even in that change, something important remains unchanged. The impact. Because even if the spotlight moves on, the influence of performers' work continues in a different form. It lives in old performances, in archived footage, in shared memories, and in the emotional connection people still feel when they revisit that era. And that is why their story continues to appear in discussions even today. Not because they are still active, but because their chapter in entertainment history still matters. Every story like this eventually reaches the same realization. Fame is temporary, but contribution is permanent. Time changes visibility, but it does not erase meaning. And even when public attention fades, the legacy remains quietly in place. So when we look at their journey from beginning to end, it is not a story of disappearance. It is a story of transition, of time moving forward, and of life naturally evolving beyond the spotlight. And maybe that is the most honest way to understand it, because not every story needs a dramatic ending to be complete. Some stories simply continue in memory, in reflection, and in the way people still choose to remember them. And that is where their story truly lives now, not in headlines, not in constant appearances, but in the quiet space where history and memory meet. And in that space, their story still exists.